Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to our very first Capital Improvement Advisory Committee meeting today, February 25th, 2026. And our first order of business is the swearing in of our brand new members. So this concludes the swearing in of our members. Next up will be the election of our officers. So now we will open up the floor for the nomination for a chairperson.
I'd like to nominate C.J. Johnson for
Excellent.
chair.
Any other nominations? Excellent. Any further nominations from the floor? All right. Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor of C.J. Johnson as chair, say aye. Okay, and we'll probably need to call the vote because it's kind of official.
Jacob Warman, how do you vote? Aye. Joseph Snyder, how do you vote? Aye. Charles Edmonds, how do you vote? Aye. John Stevenson, how do you vote? Aye. Clarence Johnson, how do you vote? Aye. Caroline Kranz, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jim Tidwell, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jeremy Raines, how do you vote?
They need to abstain because they're alternates.
Okay. Okay.
And then what's the call? So how many for? Did you mark on your paper who said that?
5-2.
5-2. Okay, and then all those in favor of John Stevenson, how do you vote? Monica, go through the list again. Will you go through the names again?
Jacob Warman, how do you vote?
Oh, that's true. Fair enough. I was just going through all the rules. All right, so CJ, you're now the chair. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Excellent. So now we will vote for vice chair. Floor is open for nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate John Stevenson as vice chair.
Then let's call the vote.
Jacob Warman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Joseph Snyder, how do you vote?
Aye.
Charles Edmonds Jr., how do you vote?
He said aye.
I'm sorry. He said aye. Aye. Okay. John Stevenson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Clarence Johnson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Caroline Kranz, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Jim Tidwell, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. So it's
All right.
7.
Passes 7-0. Excellent. So now we have a chair and a vice chair. Congratulations to you both. All right. And your terms are effective immediately. So now that we have all of our positions in order, let's do a quick roll call so that we can put into record who is all in the room. Monica, if you'll do that as well.
Jacob Warman.
Just say here.
Here.
Joseph Snyder.
I know you're here.
Here.
Charles Edmonds Jr. John Stevenson.
Here.
Clarence Johnson.
Here.
Carolyn Kranz.
Here.
Jim Tidwell.
Here.
And both the alternates as well.
And so Jeremy Raines
Here.
and Ty Lambert.
Here.
Thank you.
Staff in attendance today, we have our esteemed director, DJ Harrell. My name is Jennifer Roberts. I'm the Assistant Director of Development Services over the program. We have Kamal Cruz with us. He is also an administrator of the program. We have Rebecca Hernandez, who is a project assistant of the program, and then Monica Smith, who's just briefly stepped away, but she'll be right back. She is our planning assistant with the program, and then behind me is Doug Black. He is the city attorney, or senior city attorney over the program. Okay, next up is our ethics training, and I'll turn it over to Doug.
Good morning, y'all. I heard some of you were only at 70% ethics, so we're going to try to up the game a little bit. Ethics are dry, about as dry as my cough, so that may be the only joke you get. I'm the assistant city attorney. I've been doing the legal on this advisory commission since about 2013 or 14. We've gone through some changes at the legislature. Some of you have been on this commission already. Some of you have not. Some of you may be wondering what you're going to be doing here. Jennifer will be explaining most of that, and I'll be available for legal/color commentary. But first, we're going to talk through the city's ethics code, and I trust that you all have taken the Open Meetings Act online. I may touch briefly on that again. We have a couple slides on that, and then a couple slides on the administration of this particular commission. Those of you who were on it before, you may be wondering where the rest of your partners are, your compatriots. We are no longer the same board as the Plan Commission, and that is because the Texas legislature made a change back in 2025 that we had to adjust to. So welcome. The city has an ethics code. It is codified in the city code. If you would like to dig into it, here are the numbers for it. We will be providing you with this presentation that you can do a little bit of your own research if you want to. The bottom line is, if you ever have a question, reach out to this through Jennifer or directly to me, and we'll help to answer it. This may come up in a second as we go through some of the things that may trigger you as a possible prohibition given your positions, certainly in the real estate industry. We will work through that independently if we need to. So we have established an ordinance, and as you notice in the third bullet point down there, it applies to boards and commission members. It supplements existing, at least these 4 existing state laws on ethics. I'm not going to read all that to you. City's ethics code is in this particular section. Any questions on how that reads, what it means for you? Just making decisions not from a personal nature, but on behalf of the city. I will throw in an aside, and at the very end, I'm going to lay out a little bit of what your role is. Your role is very restricted by statute. So this is not a free-thinking, free movement type of board, unfortunately for you. But it also means we're very efficient in how we work and how we operate. Here's the may not portion of the ethics code. I think certainly very important is number one, accept or solicit things that might look like benefits from the outside for your work here on this committee. Disclosure of confidential information. If we have any, we would let you know. I don't know that we have any confidential information, but you'll be learning some things about the inner workings of the city and financing and for transportation and things like that you'll have to use your best judgment as to when your friends ask what's going on. You may not feel appropriate to tell them, and that you're certainly within your rights not to. The bottom one, engage in exchange, purchase, sale of property, goods, services with the city. That is something, if it comes up because of your real estate and other commercial backgrounds, we will talk through whether there's any issue and what we might need to do. We're not here to prohibit your business. In fact, the state legislature mandated that we have a certain number of members from the real estate and commercial industry. So we're going to deal with that if we have to. As it comes up, we'll work through it. You are not to turn around and be at the podium representing folks that may come and have any business before this commission. That rarely happens. But there is a time in our annual or our updates that we do every 5 years when things could get a little bit heated. Otherwise, that's really setting it impact fees, which you'll learn more about here in a few minutes. Any questions on this slide? Here's the definition of a substantial interest. Again, we will talk through if you have property interests or are representing folks that we need to help you with. When the legislature throws us curveballs and we react, we have to see how the statute and our policies and our ordinances come together. So this is new for us to have to deal with that. Any questions on that one? And again, we'll be sending this to you so you can have it as a resource. So that was the ethics portion. Congratulations. Let's talk real quick about the Open Meetings Act. You've taken that. In this group, we are 4 members for a quorum. We have 7 members and the 2 alternates. Thank you all for being here. As we were saying before the meeting, if any of the 7 members indicate that they won't be able to attend, we will call on the alternates. Otherwise, you are welcome to attend, but you would be sitting in the audience and not participating. That is so that we could continue a quorum and we on our semi-annual meetings. So this board only meets twice a year, except for in the years when we are updating our plan. If you aren't aware, we will be posting the agendas 3 business days before each meeting. That's another new state law change. It used to be 72 hours for those of you who were keeping score at home. And the agenda is fixed. So the items on the agenda are what we discuss. Veering off the agenda will be stopped after not too long. If it's tangentially related to the discussion, it can go a little bit, but if it starts to really veer off, we're going to stop and go back to the agenda, talk about those things. The public may come to these meetings. They don't, except for once in a while. And so, like I said, we're pretty efficient. And obviously, if just like at council, if the public asks about an item that's not on the agenda, it's not a discussion item. We'll take it as a question. Staff will research it, get back to the requester, and perhaps bring it forward to you again. This is not that kind of board, so I don't expect that to happen. This is important. When staff emails to you, generally it will be to the chair only, is what the rest of you will see, because you will have been blind copied on it. This is to prevent the accidental establishment of a quorum, what we call a walking quorum, by replying all. We do not want you discussing any of this business outside of this meeting, this public space. So if you get an email from everyone, even if you don't see that you could reply all, it's better not to. And usually what you'll be getting is, hey, here's the next meeting date, can you come? But still, we don't want to open up anything to the possibility of a walking quorum. Social gatherings, don't discuss city business. If you all somehow find yourself at an event together, just don't talk about it. Don't talk about your time here or anything that we're discussing here at the CIAC. Don't let criminal penalties scare you, but they're out there to prevent these kinds of things. Okay, so here again, we've talked about this. This is our city ordinance that we established in 2025 as a result of the state legislature making changes. 4 members and an alternate are representatives of the real estate development or building industries. And I trust you know who you are and which of these groups you fall in. 3 members and 1 alternate are our general representatives. If we are missing a member of the real estate development or building industries, either alternate could step in. So that is not a requirement that we have 4 members at the table, but the membership of the committee has to start that way. Any questions on that? This is dense. These are our playing rules for this board. Really, Part C is what your role is, and those 5 points. You will be advising the city council after taking a vote to accept a report, which will be presented here later, and that report is then forwarded to the city council basically with y'all's blessing on it. And over the years of this program, the staff has gotten very good at describing hitting the high points in C 1 through 5. When we are updating the plan, we will have professional reports come in from our consultant. You'll be having those to review and taking action on those as well. That's the off time when we'll be meeting more than twice a year. And we have adopted procedural rules for you. They're fairly simple. I believe, Jennifer, you have a copy for everyone, or we'll provide them by email. Either way, they're basic rules of decorum for a committee. And that's all I've got, unless you have any questions on this. Great, thank you. Now let's have a real meeting.
All right. So next up, we will do the approval of the minutes from the April 30th, 2025 meeting. I sent out to everyone those minutes and a link to the video, since this is a brand new kind of reassemblage of the CIAC. Most of you weren't there, so hopefully you had a chance to look at it and find the minutes accurate. Turn it over to the chair.
I will add, if anyone is uncomfortable that was not at the last meeting in voting to approve the minutes, you may abstain, and it does not affect the adoption of the minutes. I believe 2 members were here who could be the vote to adopt the minutes, for those of you who don't feel comfortable doing it after having reviewed the meeting or on the video.
Just for clarity, are we accepting meeting minutes or approving?
Just approving. I mean, just accepting.
Just accepting,
It's
okay.
formality.
Excuse me, this is just a reminder for everyone when you speak to turn your microphones on. If we don't do that, then no one's going to be able to hear you. Thank you.
I'd like to get a motion, please.
I'll move to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Second.
Can we call a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? One abstention.
So the motion carries.
Motion carries.
And the, the vote was 6-0 with 1 abstention. All right. Next up, staff comments. So first, I want to welcome you all again, and thank you so much for volunteering for the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee. It has been a long slog to get to here, and readily admit it, but I really appreciate your patience as we dodge and weave and address what came out of Austin over the last state legislature, establishing the new committee, and all of the administrative work that goes with that. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being willing to participate and to go through this with us. In this last period of time, we've had a couple of changes. Kamal Cruz joined the program in December, all the way from New York City. So he has been a great partner in this and really helped to bring all this together. I certainly couldn't do it without him. I also want to recognize Rebecca Hernandez and Monica Smith. They have been, again, amazing helpmates as well, as we were all kind of learning how to do this for the first time. I was explaining before that when this was the City Plan Commission, pretty much everyone in the City Plan Commission just kind of paused for a moment and then suddenly became the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee, and it was really simple for us. We just walked in and took over. So needing to kind of create all of the rules and all of the work that goes into prepping the room and everything else for y'all. This is new for us. So please bear with us, but we certainly hope we'll shine for you, if not today, in future. Any questions for us before we move forward into the next portion of our meeting? All right. Now for the fun part, Transportation Impact Fees 101. All right. So we're going to cover quite a lot of ground, but I'm not going to read every slide. We've provided this presentation to you, and it will be recorded. So if you are just really itching to hear more, you can always play it back later, or if you need something to go to sleep by. So our agenda will be covering what are transportation impact fees, the legal grounding for those fees, the study itself, and that will become more important for us as we move into the next study update. If there are any exemptions, credits, discounts, and appeals, spoiler alert, there are. The timing and the impact fee project funding, Capital Improvement Advisory Committee, what is your role in all of this? The semi-annual report contents, and then who would you contact if you have any questions, and then if you actually have any questions right now. So what are the fees? So they are a charge or an assessment by the city on developments to cover the costs associated with public transportation infrastructure improvements or expansions compelled by and attributed to new development. In short, this is a fee that the city is allowed to leverage in areas where we have major infrastructure, roadway infrastructure improvements required. And they are assessed based on the final plat, which means the final plat sort of locks in which study is used to assess that base fee. And because within the study, we determine our maximum fee. And then we look at when the building permit was applied for. So when was that taken in? And that determines what kind of the fee schedule that's actually levied on the building permit. And it's all based on a mathematical formula. I promise we will not go through that today, but there is a slide for later reading. So these are direct payments. So this comes directly from our development community to the city of Fort Worth. And we use those revenues to fund eligible projects. An eligible project is identified within our transportation impact fee study. So the 2022 transportation impact fee study includes maps and lists of the projects that the city can leverage these funds towards. And that's really important because if it's not in the study, we're not able to leverage those fees in those areas or to those specific projects. And that's why these updates are really important, because then we're able to add projects as we annex land or areas change. So the impact fees are not exactions. They are each assessed. Exactions are rough proportionality, and impact fees are assessed separately. And that's really important because not every project in the city of Fort Worth has an impact fee. It's only in areas where there's a need. Running ahead, the impact fees are in Chapter 395 of the Texas Local Government Code, and exactions are in Chapter 212.
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Can you help us understand some of the terminology you're talking about rough proportionality and I forget what the other one was.
Exactions?
Yes.
Or, so the exactions are, again, they're in Chapter 212 of Local Government Code, and they're infrastructure requirements required of a development or developer because they're there. So if it wasn't for the fact that they wanted to build whatever it is they wanted to build there, we wouldn't need these infrastructure improvements, and that's the exaction. And it's in the immediate vicinity, generally, of that development. So if a 20-story office building arrived and they'll need a lot of water, so then they will improve the water supply line out in front of the building. That's because they need that for the building. So if I put it in transportation terms, which might be more helpful, if we build that 20-story office building and they're going to increase the number of cars on the road by 25%, then they may need to build a new lane on the roadway in each direction. So that's the exaction. For the Transportation Impact Fee Program, that's about regional mobility. So we zoom out a bit further into our service areas, and this fee is collected to improve regional mobility. So in order to get those cars to that new lane that was built out in front of that development. Rough proportionality is where we look at the development itself and determine whether or not what's being asked is proportionate to the project. So if it's a hot dog stand and we ask them to build a lane, that lane costs multiple times what that hot dog stand would cost. So that would not be proportionate. So we're trying to make sure that what's being asked, and we, by virtue, I mean the state and then the city of Fort Worth, is that whatever's asked via an exaction is proportionate, makes sense with what's being developed.
I'll add roughly proportionate, which is a legal term developed through case law. Some of you may be familiar with Flower Mound, Texas, very famous case out of Flower Mound in the years past. So we could do a presentation on rough proportionality. It doesn't really apply to capital improvements, for transportation impact fees, but it does often get confused. So if you'd like, we could put together a presentation on the difference between rough proportionality and the impact fees. But as Jennifer said, the impact fees are for a region, and she'll describe the regions, and they're not directly related to that particular development, which is the rough proportionality is directly related to the development, to a particular development.
Yes, sir. What we can do afterwards is provide those to you and to the entire commission. Yes, sir. Oh, okay. All right, moving forward. So the legal background. As I mentioned before, the transportation impact fees are grounded in Texas Local Government Code, Chapter 395. The title doesn't quite give it away, but it says financing capital improvements required by new developments in municipalities, counties, and certain other local governments. Translate that into the transportation impact fees. There are also water and sewer impact fees included in that chapter. Now for city code, all of this lives in Chapter 30, Streets and Sidewalks, Article 8, Transportation Impact Fees. So here are the state legislative references. I won't read them all, but that whole chapter covers impact fees of both types, transportation and water, and this kind of provides guidance on where to look for specific items, so such as how are cities authorized to leverage the fee, what can be paid by the fee. This is really important because there are limitations of what can be paid with these fees, and on this next slide, what cannot be paid by the fees. And this is something that's really important for us as a city, is to understand what the requirements are for this type of money. Previously, I was asked, well, Jennifer, if you've got a project and some of it fits in the you can pay for it category and some of it fits in the you can't pay for it category, what do you do? Well, we can do a few things. Many times we can partner with our development community to cover that gap, and the city has other types of funding that has different limitations on it that can be used to fill in the gaps. So sort of like a puzzle, we can use all these different types of funding to create the full picture. So within the study, we have a capital improvements plan, or we call a transportation improvement plan in the study, and it describes the improvements that we plan to make. And this is the projected improvements over the next 10 years. Now, for those who might be kind of watching what's happening in our master thoroughfare plan, the master thoroughfare plan horizon is 25 years. The impact fee program, we only look at a 10-year horizon. The reason for that is if we looked, besides state law says so, but the big reason for it is that if we were projecting a service unit or the amount that we charged over what we could possibly build in 25 years, that would be really hard to determine with inflation, and it would also be really large, and it would be untenable to leverage. So the horizon is only 10 years. We have a maximum fee per service unit, so this is the maximum that the state would allow the city to leverage. The state law also determines when the fee is to be assessed and to be collected. That's during the building permit is when that's collected. And how we get our authority to do so, and then the refunds. So if the funding isn't spent within 10 years, it is to be refunded if unused. So the intent of the state and of the city is to collect these funds and to put them to good use. So the program itself was adopted by the city of Fort Worth in 2008. And so we've had it for quite a long time, really proud of it, almost on our 20-year birthday, so we're doing pretty good. And the article that established this program has been amended many times, as recently as last year with the legislative updates, reestablishing our committee as it is now. So the study itself, the study update is required every 5 years. As I mentioned before, our timeline horizon is 10 years of growth, and we established our service area boundaries. We identify all the eligible projects, so the map with the list of projects. We determine the total cost of infrastructure, and then we establish the maximum assessable fee for each service area. There's quite a lot of work here. So our service areas, as identified on the map, we have 28 service areas. 9 of them are no-fee service areas, and they are 6 miles max across. Now, I know 6 miles is not an area, but it is kind of the furthest distance between the furthest out points in those service areas. So some of them look a bit smaller, and some of them are a bit bigger. So the funds collected within a service area must be spent on projects within that service area. So money doesn't shift from the north side of town to the south or east to west. And that's really important because we want to make sure that we are addressing the challenges for regional mobility in those areas. And just as a side note, so the ones that are gray, they are the ones that are no-fee service area, and that is because the infrastructure that was contemplated within the master thoroughfare plan has been built. So that's why they're gray. So there isn't a need for the transportation impact fee program in those service areas. Now, I mentioned before that if something changes in those areas and we determine that there is a need, they can be turned back on, but that would only be with a study update. So that wouldn't be every 6 months, that would be every 5 years.
If I could interject something here, you may be thinking, well, what about streets inside the gray areas that are deteriorating, falling apart? Impact fees are not allowed to be used for maintenance. And that's a critical thing to know because people will ask, why can't we use them? And we're prohibited by the statute. It is to fund new capacity based on new growth.
Thank you, Doug. All right, so fee and no-fee service areas. If you're in the service areas that are colorful on the map, then the fee applies, and if not, it doesn't. And so let's go through an example where we talk about maybe a project that is in one of the colorful or fee-bearing service areas. So we'll be looking at service area F, and this little snippet, this image, actually comes from the study. And so that's one of the maps that's included. So if you really want to take a look, you can take a look at service area F, and you see that map, and really, really tiny, and you can't see on the slide, are the numbers of the projects, and that goes back to other sheets that identify the cost estimates behind those projects. The blue squares, those are the intersection improvements that are contemplated within the study. And so this gives us sort of that visual of what is eligible for impact fee funding. So this is based on the master thoroughfare plan, and we can only include projects that increase roadway capacity. So again, adding lanes or intersection improvements that take an intersection from a four-way stop to a fully signalized intersection, or adding dual lefts or dedicated rights, those kinds of things. Now this funding program, it's not a commitment to build. It's just something that we anticipate building because we can't really drive collection. We can't force people to build in the city of Fort Worth and make them, make this all happen. So we're projecting this. This is our plan, but it isn't a commitment to build. The eligible projects include recently completed projects with excess capacity, city capital projects where we can leverage these funds, and then projects that need to be completed by the MTP, intersections, and then bond projects completed with outstanding debt. So we have a couple of places where we can leverage these funds. So Schedule 1 is the term that we use for the maximum assessable rate that the city can charge. And that Schedule 1, again, is dictated by the state and the formulas therein. And this is our methodology. So we gather all the land uses and population projections. So we talk to COG, we look at our zoning maps, we work with our development community to see what's hot and what's not in the next 10 years. We account for the master thoroughfare plan requirements. TPW is in the process of updating their MTP, and so we'll be including that update in our next study update. Again, thinking about a 10-year horizon, and we remove the costs associated with existing development and growth after 10 years. So again, we're wanting to make sure that we're just looking at this 10-year segment of time, and then we calculate the maximum assessable fee. So here are the Schedule 1 rates for 2022 in our study, and so these are the maximum rate, the Schedule 1 rate. We don't charge Schedule 1, we charge what's called Schedule 2, which is a percentage of Schedule 1. You'll notice that these rates are different in each of the service areas, and that's because they have different needs. So in some of the service areas, there are a lot of roadways that need to be built. In other service areas, not really. So because of that, or they're mostly built out. So the service unit changes depending on the service area. So for example, we've got highlighted a couple of low ones and a couple of high ones. So AA in far north Fort Worth, it's dark purple on the map. It has the lowest at $355 a service unit, and that's because by and large, the majority of the MTP that's required in that area has been built, while if we look at M or Z, so M being over in far east Fort Worth and Z in far south Fort Worth, that rate is higher because there are much larger MTP requirements. And I would say also, for example, like in M, building a road in M is a little bit more challenging because there's a lot of creeks, rivers, and streams through there. So we're not just building a road, we're building a road and some major stormwater infrastructure to support it.
What constitutes a service unit?
So a service unit, as established by the state, is an area that is no more than 6 miles across. We, as we've contemplated where these, pardon?
Unit is drilling.
Oh, sorry, service unit.
Yeah.
So let me move forward. So the service unit is here. This is the math behind the service unit. So we are, well, actually, we'll start here and then we'll get back to that. So this is how we calculate what that service unit is. We figure out the some of the eligible costs in the service area, so the roadway cost, and then the growth projected in the next 10 years. And that's how we come up with that cost per service unit. But a service unit is different depending on what the use is. So in a residential situation, it would be one house or one dwelling. For a commercial unit or an industrial, it would be per 1,000 square feet. So the unit of measure is dependent on the use of the property. But the service unit is dependent or is determined by this calculation.
Does that map that we were looking at before incorporate any of the ETJ?
No.
Will you go back to that?
So I have a question specifically about AA. For you guys who don't know me, I live up north. I'm one of the forgotten stepchildren. So that area is surrounded by ETJ, and then the donut is Hazlet. But there's a lot of new construction and growth that's going on up there in the ETJ. So how do we evaluate that, or is this later in the presentation, that when we're going to have to annex these places through either development agreements or requests, that now there's an additional burden that's put on us because they're not always fully complete when they get brought on board? Like there's more lane miles that need to be done, and things like that. Does that mess up the math, or do we have to restudy it when there's annexation?
So we restudy it every 5 years. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What you'll notice on that map, as you're absolutely right, That is the Fort Worth city limits today, well, as of 2022. When this map was frozen in as part of the report, we're a very spread out city, land area wise. It's pretty shocking actually to see how big we are. But by statute, this group transportation impact fees cannot be assessed in the ETJ. If you are reading through the statute, water can be. And water actually on their committee must have one representative from the ETJ. Doesn't say where in the ETJ, but they have at least one. But this group will not. This group is only city limits. And we have, in our ordinances developing the program, we have the opportunity to, and in the statute itself, to do I'd say small changes, like in between the 5-year studies, we could do micro studies and make amendments to particular service areas. We don't. We haven't done that yet, but we've given ourselves the opportunity to add in those annexations prior to the 5-year, but we haven't done it. We haven't begun to do that yet, and I don't know that we will. So right now, if someone starts annexing in between the 5 years, they are not paying the impact fees until we bring them in through the study, and this is the process that can get a little bit contentious, as I was mentioning earlier, when it comes down to the assessment and the collection rates of the impact fees. So as our city limits expand through annexations, this map won't expand until we do our next 5-year update.
So any of those changes that can be in between the 5-year periods, are they administrative, or do they have to be amended through this committee here?
The annexation can take place upstairs at City
Right.
Council, but we would have to go through, we cannot do it administratively. We would have to go through I would call it a micro study for that service area, and the entire service area would have to be recalculated, which is okay because it doesn't affect the rest of the dominoes. It's service area specific, but we haven't started doing that yet.
Do areas that include a PID come into play at all?
Yes. Yes, they do. And I'll add some context to what Doug was saying. So while it might be a micro study, we would still need to go through the entire process. So there would be 2 sets of public hearings and I think 2 council votes, and and then lots of going around and socializing the study with all of the interested parties, so neighborhood groups, HOAs, et cetera. So while the study or the update itself might be small, the work to lift that and to add it into the study is the same as if we were updating the entire study itself. And that's one of the challenges that we faced in kind of contemplating that. How would that work in that 5-year cycle?
If you're interested in 395, the legislature has dedicated a lot of ink to how we establish and then reestablish our fee. They spend a lot of time doing that and a lot less time telling us what we can do with the fee. It's very procedural driven. That's why I say you don't have a whole lot of free leeway in this commission.
All right, back to the math. So this would be our maximum assessable rates. So what the state contemplates as the maximum that we could spend. So in our example, we've got 1 single-family home, so that is our single service unit. We've multiplied it by the service unit cost, and so we get to a charge of $14,420 per house. But our council has said, I don't want to charge the maximum. I would like to charge a percentage of that, and that is Schedule 2. So this is our actual collection rate. So in the case of residential developments, we charge 60% of the maximum, and that will be the rate through May of this year. Starting June 1st, it'll be at 65% of that maximum rate. For non-residential uses, it's 40% of Schedule 1, and that aligns with our economic development goals. So when I take the $14,400 and multiply it by 60%, then it's $8,652 per house. So how would you do that math? It's actually not a lot of fun. So we have an estimator for that. If you go to our website, and the link is there on the page, there's a button, and when you click that button, you download our estimator. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and in it, you put in when the final plat was approved, or when you think it will be approved, if you're just estimating, kind of figure out what those costs might be. When the building permit was accepted, again, if you're estimating, am I submitting it this month, next month, throw that date in there, and then the service area. And then you'll also put in like what your use is.
You can plat it with very narrow lots and very small houses that are not required to have garages, as an example, and they have less setbacks, so on and so forth. And if we assess them at the same rate, kind of defeating the principle of affordable housing, because the rest of the design is headed in that direction. So we might need to take a look at that.
Yes, sir, we will do. Thank you. So moving into our exemptions, we have quite a few exemptions in there, many of them established by the state. So public school districts are exempt from paying impact fees, which is in support of our ISDs. Open enrollment charter schools and private schools are also exempt. Through our Neighborhood Empowerment Zone, or our NEZ program, those projects are exempt. And then change of use permits for previously occupied space, those are also exempt. Now, this does not include tenant finish outs. So what this is referring to is a shell. So many times you'll see very large, multi-million square foot properties. The shell is built first, and then there's that first finish out where the actual use of a portion of that space is determined, or the whole space is determined, and that's when the impact fees are charged there. But if that space was then to redevelop, then there would not be an impact fee charged. Yes, sir.
Question. On the exempt items that are listed here, are they still subject to rough proportionality?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Very good question. We get asked that by the ISDs a lot. So for the credits, so there's a portion of the state law and our city ordinance that talks about credits against transportation impact fees, because the numbers that we're talking about are quite large. And we're going to give credit for right-of-way that's been dedicated for our MTP. So this is a thank you for helping us with our regional mobility. So credits given for the right-of-way, for improvements, or funds towards construction of MTP roadways, and any other transportation improvement supplying additional capacity. And those credits are good for 10 years. The credit for the exaction, this is where it's captured. And what's really interesting is that we want to make sure that that we capture that credit, and we call it the coupon, because we want to thank our developers and our development community for helping us build that roadway infrastructure, because without them we couldn't build as much as we have today, and we recognize that. And this is one way of making sure that they have benefit of the work that they've done. And these snippets here, they're kind of wordy, but it talks about when we can give that credit, how that credit is given, and it's important that that we work with our development community to maximize the credit that's available to them.
So here's where rough proportionality and exactions and impact fees do cross. If they're required to build it, and it is on our plan, on the roadway in our plan, or this plan for this group, then we can provide credit for that construction cost and or the right-of-way cost. That doesn't absolve them from paying impact fees, but the credit helps.
To offset that. That's why we call it the coupon. So there's no cash value. It's like a coupon for Burger King. You can't use it for McDonald's. It's that kind of thing. All right, so things that we cannot give credit for. So right-of-way or infrastructure required solely for the new development, and then roadways on the MTP, but not on the transportation improvement plan. So that's important. So it has to be within the study. So we're really trying to make sure that we kind of stay in alignment with the study as it was contemplated in 2022.
Just a little color. The first bullet, if you go back.
Yes, sir.
infrastructure required solely for the new development, think of that as within the development, the internal roads that service the neighborhoods, as opposed to the external roads that the majority of traffic will travel to either, if they live there, or to go past. That's the difference there.
I'm sorry, Jennifer, can you go back to the previous
Yes, sir.
question on that? Roadways on the MTP and not in the TIF or turf study. How would that happen other than a timing issue on a modification to the MTP that maybe wasn't studied as part of the transportation impact fee? I'm just struggling with that one because generally when you get to the master infrastructure, the master transportation plan, that is pretty inclusive based on a 20-year planning.
Yes, sir.
So how would that, I'm just curious how that would happen.
So right now, TPW is updating the MTP, and they're going to be making changes. And those changes will go into effect before we do our next study update. So there will be a period of time where there'll be a mismatch.
Okay, so it's a timing issue, 100%.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And so as Doug was talking about, is we've got the kind of where do exactions and impact fees intersect. So when the exaction or the rough proportionality includes impact fee eligible right-of-way, roadways, or signals, then the city must give impact fee credit. And that's our goal. It's the thank you. We really appreciate you building this infrastructure for us and improving our regional mobility.
What this also demonstrates is that the impact fees are not directly tied to the infrastructure being adjacent to a development. Rough proportionality is much more closely tied to adjacency, and impact fees are service area wide.
Thank you, Doug. So discounts, because what we're talking about are usually very large dollar amounts. So we have different discounts. We have 4. So we have one that's called the adequate public facilities discount. So that is when the roadways that take on 75% of the peak hour traffic are built out to its ultimate MTP cross section. So if it was contemplated for it to be 6 lanes, 3 in either direction, and that's what's been built, or even that's what the developer is building, then they'll be eligible for the adequate public facilities discount. We have an extraordinary investment discount, so that would be for developments that are indeed extraordinary, and we'll have more details in a second. We have a mixed-use multimodal development discount, so this is where we're looking at trip capture within a development, and then a small business discount, so that we can help our small business owners.
What's considered to be a small business?
Let me move ahead. I'm going to get to that. So in this 4th slide, I'll cover it. So I'll get to it in one moment. So the adequate public facilities discount, as I mentioned, is 50% reduction on the collection rate. So not even that maximum rate. So as I mentioned, for commercial properties, we collect 40% of the max. So we go from 100% to 40% of the max, and then we would cut that in half again. So we'd only be charging 20% of that maximum rate for those properties if they qualify for the adequate public facilities discount. Next up is our mixed-use multimodal development discount, and it is, again, about trip capture, and that is a variable percentage based on how many trips are captured within that development. So Trinity Lakes is one of those that's right adjacent to a light rail station, and so in their traffic impact assessments, they discuss and contemplate capturing those trips within the development where they're not cars being used, but rather folks are going to live, work, and play through light rail, through transit, through buses, and those trips are captured within the development. Then our extraordinary investment discount, this is a variable discount as well, from 25 to 50% reduction of the, the adopted Schedule 2, or that collection rate, and these are the criteria for that. So $25 million in capital investment, excluding land costs. So again, very extraordinary. 75 new permanent jobs at twice minimum wage. And so that's the really important developments that come to us. And as that development maybe spends $10 million more or has 75 more new jobs, let's say it's 150 new jobs, and that percentage increases. So as they become more extraordinary, they get more discounts.
Is that, on those discounts, that's a Either or an all of the above?
All of the above.
So you have to meet all three criteria, just for
Yes.
clarity. Okay.
Yes, sir. Then we have the small business discount to get to your question, Chair. So that's a 25% reduction, and these are the criteria. So they're an independently owned entity with a Fort Worth business address. We're looking for homegrown. And they're not a subsidiary or a franchisee of a chain with more than 5 franchises, with the annual revenue of $25 million or less for the most recent 12-month period, with 25 employees or less, and in business for at least a year prior to applying for the discount. And when they apply for this, they will certify or attest to meeting these criteria. All right, so appeals. As you have probably kind of thought about already, there's probably folks who want to have a good discussion about the impact fees before they pay them. And so they come to us with an appeal for those fees. They must be submitted in writing, and email is acceptable, within 30 days of levying the fee. So that would be at the point when they submit their building permit and the fee is actually put on their building permit. At that point, they have 30 days to appeal. Sometimes we get those appeals earlier than that. We will entertain them, but the time clock hasn't really started until they actually submit their building permit. But of course, we want to provide as much transparency and information as possible.
Let me add another timing issue. When they submit their final plat is when we make the maximum assessable, and as written on the plat. They also know their percentage of the collection rate. So the fees, the maximum that we would charge them is known at platting. The amount we're going to collect from them is variable and does step, and that is at building permit time. So if they wanted to appeal the imposition of the impact fee between platting and building permit, we would allow that.
So what can be appealed? The land use designation. There is some confusion around this point. So the land use isn't necessarily the zoning, it's the ITE trip generation land use. So, a commercial location could be a restaurant, it could be a donut shop, it could be a hair salon. And each of those businesses have a different trip generation profile in the ITE trip generation manual. So we don't consider it just commercial, it's a type of commercial and the vehicles generated by that type of use. Also, if there are discounts applicable, sometimes we miss one, and so it's wonderful when our customers are able to come back to us and say, "Hey, can you double check that I'm not eligible for this?" So we appreciate being reminded or our eye drawn to that, and then they appeal based on credit available. So if they are, if the developer team is thinking, "Oh, we might have some credits, can we talk about that now and maybe get that in the works?" So what's required for that appeal? Depending on what you're appealing, we would want maybe a trip generation study, information about similar developments, anything about your traffic distribution, maybe other sites for this particular development, what we could look at, measure, and understand. And there's multiple appeal levels. So first would be to the director, then to our city manager's office, and then with final appeal to city council.
Excuse me.
Sir.
Do you find, what percentage of developers are appealing these things? Is there a large percentage or small percentage?
Yeah, I would say it's a small percentage, and typically it's for our larger developments. For the smaller developments, it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. And what levels are they getting to? I'm assuming they're not going beyond the director?
Sometimes they go to our city manager's office.
Okay. And are you seeing that they're winning these appeals or no?
I would say 25-75. Sometimes it's a misunderstanding of the law and the ordinance, and it gives us an opportunity to clarify and even to update information on our website to make it more clear. Because usually if there's a misunderstanding, it's on our part for not making our guidance as clear as possible. We've been accused sometimes of city speak, and so sometimes we need to take our language and actually turn it into the language of our development community. So sometimes it's that. Other times it's maybe having some education around the ITE trip generation manual versus our zoning uses, because there's also building code uses. So we have a lot of different uses in the development arc, And so we want to clarify, which portion that we're talking about. So a lot of times it's a conversation and a discussion that turns into understanding. But other times it does end up going to our city manager's office. But a lot of times those discussions are still with the director, and we try to almost do the director and the CMO step at the same time, so that, policy-wise, we're in alignment.
Thank you.
I would add, the city of Fort Worth, in my experience, and it's been 15 or actually more years now, is always open to discussion, and when reasonable, will compromise. So I believe that's been the approach taken. It's not a hard and fast, it is hard and fast rules at the beginning, but if the discussion goes through, some misunderstandings perhaps, or the reasonableness of the request, I think reasonable compromise is often what the goal has been.
And it always helps when you have a trip generation study in your pocket. So timing. So the impact fees are assessed at the time of final plat, so this locks in which maximum assessable rates are going to be applied to the development, and then they're collected when the building permit is accepted. So that's when the collection rate is actually applied. This is the process. It looks kind of scary. The green part is the impact fee process. So in this kind of very high level travel through the development process at the city of Fort Worth, I wanted to highlight in orange where the exaction happens. So we talked about the exaction or the roughly proportionate work in the immediate vicinity of the project. The green boxes are the part where we're looking at regional mobility and how we accommodate that. So what do we use them for? We expand the scope of developer-led or public infrastructure projects. So in an example here, the development is due to build the west side of a roadway. The impact fees could be used to build the east side. So we enter into a public-private partnership, and which is normally called a 3P or a triple P, but at the city of Fort Worth and in our city speak, we call that a CFA with city participation. And we'd love to enter into those because that gives us a chance to partner with our development community to build large swaths of the city of Fort Worth's regional mobility infrastructure. And of course, to fund that project, it's got to be named within the study. So as again, and Timberland's one of those projects, you have a chance to, if it's named in the study, the improvements add capacity, it's a part of the MTP, we stay within our service area, and if there's a roadway that is kind of on the border of two service areas, then we'll do a 50-50 split between those two service areas. And things that are ineligible, and this is really important, the state law codifies this, is staff time is not included in that. So review, project management, or inspection, or on-site private improvements are not eligible for funding. So what is your role in all of this? So the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee was established to advise and assist in our adopting of our land use assumptions, to review our transportation improvement program, to monitor how we apply and implement and levy the funds. You receive your semi-annual report to see how well we're doing, and you can advise on the need to update those land uses. Just as Charles had recommended that we take a look at affordable housing and how that's impacted. This is exactly what this forum is meant for. We do have two capital improvement advisory committees. There's one for the transportation impact fees, y'all, and then we have the water and sewer impact fees. So they're a separate committee. So as Doug mentioned, 7 members, 2 alternates, and you guys were appointed at large by council. So you're not from a specific council district, but you're from all over the city, which is great, a really varied perspective. And at least 50% of the committee meets the criteria of being of the real estate development or building industries. We'll meet twice a year. Our next meeting, we anticipate that happening in May. And then we'll probably be meeting a few times after that this year, but not on like a regular monthly cadence, but as needed when we update the study. So if we take a quick trip through your semi-annual report, and Kamal will go through a much deeper dive in a second. The aim of the semi-annual report is to give you all an overview of the program, where we are, what's the collections, how have we allocated those funds. We talk about and we will include in it the recommendation that the CIAC will make today to council to hopefully approve the contents of that report. And then once that's done, council will take final action and it will be accepted.
That approval of and acceptance of the report is one of your statutory requirements to do. Her slide, couple back, was a lot nicer than the one I put up, which was just the law, but it was boiled down. But that is the action you'll take this afternoon, or hopefully not this afternoon, this morning.
I'll talk a bit faster.
We're doing pretty well. But we knew you needed this background. And it's actually good for even me to understand how it's all happening. But most of what Jennifer just told you is what staff does. Your role as CIAC is coming up next with the presentation of the semi-annual report and review of that. And this is where you're going to get all the numbers and the dollars, and it's a kind of a fun report to hear. And that'll be your next. But that is your that will then be your role as chair to call for a vote on that.
Right. So beyond that, who do you call? If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out any of the team members. So myself, Jennifer Roberts, Kamal Cruz, Rebecca Hernandez, or Monica Smith. And then for general inquiries, we have a TRIF phone number. I can't tell you how I got it, but I did. And we also have a TRIF@fortworthtexas.gov email address for any kind of general inquiries.
Again, if you have legal questions on the ethics or your representation, reach out to Jennifer or Kamal, and they'll reach out to me, and we'll all talk about it.
So that was a very lengthy presentation. Do y'all have any additional questions?
I think you did a great job, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next up in our agenda, you will stop hearing from me, and I will turn it over to Kamal to go over the semi-annual report.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Not sure this is tall enough for me, but hopefully it'll pick it up. I'll speak louder. So again, good morning. I'm Kamal Cruz. I am a Senior Capital Projects Officer here with Development Services, and I also function as the Transportation Impact Fee Administrator with Jennifer Roberts. So today I'm going to go over the actual semi-annual report with you. The report itself is for the period from April of 2025 through September of 2025. The reports, we basically provide these progress reports in alignment with State Local Government Code 395. And we base this on the city's fiscal year. And we break that into the two parts here. So we have, the city's fiscal year, of course, is October through to the end of September. So we have our first segment, which is from October through March, and then the second segment, which is April through the end of September. So that's what we are currently presenting to you on for 2025. And so, as Jennifer covered earlier, the study itself, the Transportation Impact Fee study itself, occurs once every 5 years. So we are currently within the 2022 Transportation Impact Fee study. And those, as was discussed earlier, the maximum accessible rate for those are included in Schedule 1, which was approved by City Council in October of 22. The collection rates were then approved, which was Schedule 2, which was approved in November of 2022 as well. And we covered this already, but just kind of reiterating again, for non-residential commercial, we currently have a collection rate of 40%. And for residential, this is the one that changes over time. We are currently, as of June 1st of 2025, we have a 60% collection rate. And that increases 5%, or has increased 5% each year, up to 65%, which it will be as of June 1st of 2026.
And then it will stop with the 5% increase?
Yes, based on what is currently approved, that's correct.
Okay.
But that, I'm sorry, that could be I mean, that can change. It's based on when the city accepts the new report, when the city council accepts the new report and the recommendations that we make at that time.
So the collection rate as currently identified, that has been approved by city council. So that would be an action that we would have to then take back if there were an effort. But Jennifer, do you want to?
So it can really
Add a
only
little
change
extra?
every 5 years, so this is good through 2027. All right.
I'm going to let Jennifer.
So to clarify, so Joe, you're correct, council can take that action, but based on legislative changes in 2025, in order for the fee to change, a financial impact assessment has to be undertaken by the city to do that. So previously, council could change that, quite quickly, and now we've added kind of a lead time to that. So where maybe it could have happened in 2 months' time, now it would take about a year to change those fees because we would need to advertise for, retain a consultant to undertake the fiscal impact assessment, and then we could change the rates once we had the result of that.
But the bottom line is, it can change.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It can.
And
But-
it can continue to increase or it can decrease depending on the results of impact studies and the impact fee study and the financial study that you're discussing.
So my question was simply the 5% increase that was supposed to stop in June of 2025.
Yes, sir, and it does stop then, and that step
And then-
change was approved by council in November of 2022. So that stepping all happened at that one point in time. Council contemplated then the annual change of just the residential collection rate. I think what Joe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were saying that council could actually have changed that, the steps if they wanted to, or extend the steps, and they can do, but that's a separate council action. And based on state law changes, what would have to happen before that is the financial impact assessment.
Absolutely. I think I'm clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just to put a pin in this particular slide here, the collection rates in a few service areas, which is AA, DNF, and PI, are actually 100% of Schedule 1.
Can I ask DJ a question? Because I see him over there laughing at what I'm about to ask. So when this changed a few years ago, I think you were doing the road show, trying to get everybody on board and explaining why we were doing all this. With the change at the state level, does that mean that we have to do a fiscal impact analysis on whether or not asking for more of the money that we've already deemed that we need, which we're not taking enough of to begin with, is going to help or hurt us? Is that what that means? Like if we ask for 20% more, is that going to make less development occur? Is that part of the study? Or is it just, do we really need the money and we're just upcharging you because we feel like it? That's what they're working on.
Right. It's, I think the intent of the audit is to just make sure that we're using the money wisely, right? And we're appropriating it in the way that is approved by state law.
How much money have we given back that aged out after 10 years that you're aware of?
We haven't given any.
So would it be feasible to say that we could use more?
I think the real challenge is, and I think you're right on it, right? The fact that we don't collect 100% puts the program at a disadvantage because, like, think about 40 cents on a dollar, right? It takes $1 to build this signal light. Well, if you give me 40 cents, I can just sit it in the bank until I collect enough to build that signal. However,
The signal now costs $1.25?
that's right, right. And so we're getting further and further behind. A few years ago, we presented to City Council that we were about $3.1 billion in the hole with regard to our ultimate build out per the then study of what our capital improvement should be. And so every day that we collect less than 100%, right? And I'm not suggesting that we go to 100%, but just for the sake of this conversation, every day that we don't collect that 100%, we get further and further behind on our ultimate need as a city.
Do you know offhand when we increase this, how much development we missed out on? How many people didn't develop with us because we raised the rates?
I don't know if we could quantify that, but I mean, it's a good question. I think at times when we set the rate lower, it was because we didn't want to, like originally back in 2008, and Doug may remember this, right? And Joe Snyder's here, he may even remember this, that, you know, we didn't want to set the rate too high because we were going through or trying to come out of a recession, right? And so we didn't want to deter development. And so councils always try to keep a balance between not running development off, but making sure that we have growth paying for growth, right? And so, I mean, it's been something that's been the subject of conversation in the council chambers since I've been here at the city. And I don't know that, you know, we're there, right, with growth paying for growth. And I don't know that we'll get there. But I think the goal of groups like yours, right, and, you know, staff is to try to just manage that growth with adequate roadways as we go.
So I alluded to things getting hot and spicy every now and again. It is at the 5-year update, and but I wasn't here in 2008. I've been here a long time, but not then. But TJ's right. The city council makes the political decision as to how much to collect. This body has the opportunity to recommend a collection rate. The study that the consultants will present to you in the next year or so, as we prepare for the 27 update, will recommend maximum assessable rates, and the city council has no problem with establishing a maximum assessable of 100%. It's how much we collect, and that's the political part of it. And your role is to make a recommendation as to that, which is really the only time I've ever not seen a consensus with this group. And oftentimes there is, but there's good spirited discussion. What should we recommend to the city council for a collection rate? And then the city council takes that during the public hearing cycle. That is one of the issues that comes up, and that is what draws out, if not the public, let's say the development public, and then those folks that, you know, will make the case that too much impact fees will, and the election, if the collection rate's too high, then it would stymie development and growth in the city. And so those are the political decisions that are really not in your hands. Yours are to make the recommendation based on what you feel is right going forward.
So has anybody done a study like with other adjacent cities in the area that are collecting 100%, and at what success rate these guys are developing as opposed to Fort Worth?
We haven't done that study at this time, but we have talked to our consultants, and next time we'll bring to you a slide that compares impact fee rates of the city of Fort Worth versus sort of other cities locally and further afield in Texas. There are, I want to say Trophy Club, but there's a couple that collect 100%, but they're smaller, and so their needs are smaller. And I think that's something that we need to sort of recognize as we are trying to compare apples to apples, that when you're comparing Fort Worth to, you know, let's say, McKinney, you know, they're two different characters, two different sizes, you know, that kind of thing. You know, Dallas doesn't have an impact fee program. They would be probably the most logical group to compare us to, but they don't have the program. But Austin does. So we have, you know, other kind of sister cities to compare us to, and we'll bring that to you next time.
Thank you.
If I could just make a quick comment. One of the reasons that I wanted to be on this committee is I think it's very important. City Council has set out 5 goals. There are 5 priorities. The first priority is responsible development and increasing development. To Jacob's question, I would say that there are a lot more things besides impact fees that affect development. I mean, financing is important as an example. And so it may be really hard to find something that's fungible, that we can say, well, this is exactly why this is happening or exactly why it's not happening. But I think the consultants will give us a pretty good idea of based on their experience. And then back to Joe's comment, I can see where it's going to be a balancing act, actually, where we could reach a manageable level of development, responsible development, and encourage developers. But I saw, just to give you one more data point, I saw in a real estate publication just recently that some commercial developers feel, and even some residential developers feel, that 25% of their cost of developing in the city of Fort Worth is attributable to city requirements. And that would probably include impact fees. So I think we have to keep that in mind as we do this analysis. It's a startling figure, but it's on the street, I can tell you, that people feel that way. Thank you.
Commissioners, can I add one other thing? And because we've had that conversation too about what portion of development costs are related to city fees inclusive of transportation impact fees. So a number of years ago, probably 2017 was the last time, but we've done it 3 times since we've had this program. We did a development cost and occupation study that basically laid out like the development in Fort Worth and how much of the cost related to development is related to city fees. So to answer that exact question, I mean, 2017 is a little outdated, but we can provide it to you guys as well, because at the time there was that feeling by residential and commercial developers, and you know, honestly, it just wasn't true. It basically lays out, and this study also compared us to other areas. So when you talk about looking at transportation impact fees in other areas, so we took a prototypical development, you know, around the city, in different places around the city, and compared it to other cities. So if you develop this product in Oklahoma City, what would the fees be compared to this product developing in Fort Worth? So we did that, you know, like, so we had comparable cities for commercial, you know, that we compete for industrial, like Oklahoma City, Atlanta, right, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, right? So that was for commercial, and then for residential, we looked at Flower Mound, Arlington, right, some of the places that we compete for residential development. And so, at the time, it showed that City of Fort Worth was right at the mean for, development cost, right? But it also showed the proportion of development costs related to fees and permitting was very minimal compared to, everything else that, you look into, that goes into development. And then I think the other bonus that we had was our land costs were quite lower to, the comparable cities as well.
Okay, before we move on, I'll just note that what we are here talking about, the semi-annual progress report, is actually you have a copy of it directly next to you. Or if you don't, please let us know and we'll get it to you. But again, this is for the reporting period from April of 2025 through September of 25. And so just for this discussion for this committee meeting, we actually laid it out in the presentation, and so we're stepping through the details with you all. So first off, we are going to jump into some of the things that have happened over this reporting period. So during this time frame, there has been 7 full-purpose annexations that have occurred. So we've had 7 full-purpose annexations over the period. Now that brings us to a new total of 28 annexations for about 2,500 acres that have been annexed, since adoption of the 2022 TRIF study, or Transportation Impact Fee study. And as you can see here, the land uses range from residential to institutional onto commercial. So something else that occurred, not this, actually during the previous reporting period, there was an audit that was completed on June 13th of 2025 of the Transportation Impact Fee Program. And there were certain recommendations that came out of that audit. And initially, there was the recommendations were intended to be addressed by December 31st of 2025. However, that was extended to June of 2026, partially due to the fact that there was an absence in my position, and I arrived here in December of 2025. And so staff are currently working to address these various recommendations, which we're going to step through right now. So recommendation 1A from the study was to work with our Transportation and Public Works Department and our Chief Financial Officer to use the transportation impact fees to pay allowable eligible project costs, which could be the retroactive expenses and also expenses going forward. So progress to date on this front includes that we've worked with our TPW folks, our friends, in addition to our Financial Management Services, FMS group. And there have been some changes to processes that have, in particular, our capital expenditures and improvement policy that have prioritized the expending of the transportation impact fee funds first, because it is the most restrictive of funds. As was mentioned earlier in this presentation, these funds have a time frame on them that we have to utilize them of 10 years before they would have to be essentially given back to the people who were assessed those particular fees. So with that, the internal process has been updated to make sure that those funds are now being expended first before we charge to bonds or other sources. Recommendation 1B. The recommendation was that we would have a formal process in place to implement and track the aging of the transportation impact fees themselves. So to date, we have not had to return any of these funds. But as you'll see later, we have collected a good amount of fees that we need to allocate and get expended and out the door, and we want to make sure that we are expending these in a timely fashion. So we would like to develop a formal standard operating procedure, as we call it, a SOP in city speak, to be able to track that. So we're currently working on that as well. So recommendation 1C. So this was for the actual report itself, and the intention for this was so that we actually reported out not only on the quantities that were allocated, but also spent and out the door. So, and actually have that broken down. Now, in previous years, we would, when funding was allocated to a project, we consider that is basically spent and on its way out the door. But for full transparency, we want to make sure that we identify it on every step of the process as it's appropriated, as it's encumbered, and eventually when it's fully expended. And so we anticipate being able to have that for you all in the next semi-annual report, which you actually won't have to wait that long for. So because, and I'll just kind of circle back on this point, this reporting period is through the end of September, and we would typically have had this meeting here within a few months following that reporting period here. But we have another one coming up for the period that ends in March. So we'll likely be having a meeting with you all in the April-May timeframe as well. So this will all still be fresh in your minds. Okay, I won't spend too much time on this because I feel like we've addressed some of this already, but in the 89th Texas Legislature, it passed 2 bills that impacted our particular program. That was Senate Bill SB 1883, which added a requirement for a financial audit that had to be completed. So there are some requirements here that added 120 days to the overall public comment period. It also changed the composition of the advisory committee, because as you all are aware, and we mentioned earlier that we used to be able to utilize the City Plan Commission, but we can no longer do that. And then there was also some amendments to the membership and the representation thereof. In addition to that, there was Senate Bill 840, which clarified that the city cannot apply an impact fee on land where the building has been converted to mixed use or multifamily residential. And this aligns with the city's existing program, but the ordinance text needs to be amended to highlight this particular feature. So to comply with these new changes, we adopted M&C 25-0768 that contains some of the amendments to address these particular these changes. This established new criteria for the Capital Improvement Advisory Committee, and it also amended Chapter 2, Article 1 in general regarding the character and makeup of the boards. So this is what the action that actually made those required changes. So now the fun part.
I'll step in for just a second. And
Yes.
M&C, for those of you unfamiliar, is the mayor and council communication. It is the cover memo that is staff writes and is the agenda item. That particular M&C that was referenced contained an ordinance that the council adopted, which I referenced in my presentation, which established the positions and did a bunch of other things to comply with state law to make the changes. But M&C is commonly used as a terminology here among staff as the way we communicate with the city council and the action that they'll take.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, program collections, the fun part, the money. So we have some little abbreviations that we like to use, CIR, so this is our collections and interest less refunds. So we're going to use that periodically throughout this presentation. So just try to remember that. I'll try to spell it all out again as we go through the presentation. But the CIR, the collections for this particular reporting period across all of the service areas totaled to $21.9 million. That brings our grand total through the beginning of the program to September 30th of 2025 up to $265.3 million in collections. And here we can see how those are actually dispersed across the service areas. With our highest service area being C with $42.64 million that have been collected to date.
Hey, Kamal, real quick.
Yes.
I noticed there's 2 no-fee service areas that are listed on here where fees are collected, L and W. Can you help explain that?
So Jennifer, do you want to take this from the history perspective?
Yes, so L and W were fee-bearing service areas, and with our 22 study, they became no-fee service areas. So this is reflecting the collection over the life of the program. So it was previously, and now it no longer is collecting. That's a good point. We'll indicate that on future slides.
Perfect, and this just goes to show the effectiveness of the process that we have in place, where once we do reach that critical mass of roadway infrastructure and completing the MTP roadways, then we will flip the switch in the study and no longer charge the people to build the roadways in that area. So this is just an overall view. We have this mapping to show the areas that collect the various amounts. So over the time period from the beginning of the study in 2008, there are a number of service areas that have collected well over $12 million. That includes A, B, C, D, E, Y, and Z. Now here's a breakdown that we have of the collections over this most recent reporting period from April through September of 2025. As you can see, the area that has accumulated the greatest collections is Service Area Z, with $4.5 million that has been collected during that reporting period. Okay. Now moving on to allocations, we have yet another acronym for you. We call the fund allocations inclusive of reconciliations. We call that the FAR, F-A-R. And so, the total FAR, fund allocations to date is $163.4 million that have been allocated. And again, you can see in a similar fashion, the same service areas that were designated for the highest number of quantity of collections are also the ones with the highest allocations. So here's some of the specifics about the allocations that occurred during the reporting period. We've had a number of projects that have occurred, but in addition to that, there's been, if we look at the second one down that is entitled Project Funding Allocation to Expend Legacy Transportation Impact Fees. This is in an effort to make best use of our funds. We coordinated internally to find where we could utilize these funds based on eligible expenses, and we took this to council to basically reallocate the funds into various city projects.
I had a quick question.
Yes, please.
So on that second, on the fund allocation inclusive of reconciliation FAR, on the reporting N and Z, it appears that it applies to all counts, or 5, 6, 8, 10, and 11. How's that? I thought it was just for one particular area when we allocate funds.
So that M&C covered all those areas. So a single mayor and council communication can include a multitude of projects and multiple service areas. So in the case of that item, the service areas were N and Z, but those service areas don't align with our council districts. So one service area can overlap multiple council districts. So that's why we've got the two letters and then a lot of numbers after it, is that it's the overlap of
Thank
the
you. Thank you.
areas.
And to further kind of expound upon that, there were actions that were taken in this single M&C that were in multiple service areas. So you see, so you see both N and Z identified here, but the funds that were reallocated or are allocated as a part of this action all stayed within the same service area. You see here that for a particular service area N, I have identified that there was approximately $600,000 that was actually reallocated, that was moved from one project into another to make best use of the funds. So the funds are still staying within the areas that they were originally identified in accordance with state legislation.
How do we have overlap for some of the council districts that don't touch these service areas? Are they from old maps? I'm just trying to understand. In particular, my own District 10 is not in any of those service areas.
So our council districts, the maps have changed. So changed 4 years ago now. So we went, from 9 to 11. And as those maps change, those maps are drawn without any concern to the Impact Fee program, because it's one of so many programs in the city that kind of have geographical representation, like our neighborhood empowerment zones and things like that. So they are independent of one another, and so as one changes, the other does not. So Council District 10 is in multiple, or is covered by multiple service areas.
Right, but on the map, 10 is only covered by A, AA, B, C, and D. I'm looking at the map today. N is far
Oh, I
east
see what
and
you're
Z is
saying.
at the bottom of Fort Worth. So I'm just trying to understand how that district is involved in those two service areas and funds. I mean,
Oh.
for all of us to understand.
Thank you.
How we're moving the
You've
money
discovered a typo for us. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We'll correct that.
And I had
appreciate
the
it.
same question on the bottom one, how U and T could be affecting all council districts. Unless I'm misunderstanding something about that.
So if I can say something quickly, I do believe that, within this M&C that actually occurred, that there were some other actions that took place, and then this is more so a designation of the council districts that were impacted by that M&C in totality. So in future, we can distill it down to just the ones that are impacted by this particular action.
Well, I mean, if we understand it that way in the future, that makes sense. That way, it's easy to cover because, you have the certain things that are going through. It's easy to pull the data in. It's all these other districts, but the important part for us is the service area. Correct? We don't really need to be concerned with council districts other than asking these nagging questions that we're asking right now.
Yes, and Kamal, great point. You're right. Usually the MNCs do cover multiple actions, so we'll probably
Sorry to
remove that
open
in
this
the
can of
future.
worms, guys. Sorry.
No, good questions. Thank you.
This is good. It's
One
opportunities
other
for
question
process
on that.
improvement.
Do the MNCs specify the specific projects?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, they do.
I had a question too. Are there service areas that are active now that are anticipated to be no service areas when the next study is complete?
I mean, that's actually something that we should be able to determine through the actual study process itself. And we're going to be kicking that off here in the upcoming months in anticipation of releasing the new study near the end of 2027.
Yeah. The ones that are probably the closest to that happening are the ones with the smallest service unit. So if you dare think back to the presentation I gave, there was that table with all the service units in it. And so it was like AA had an under $400 service unit. So it's one of the most likely ones to become no fee service areas in future. F is close behind it with an under $800 service unit. So those with the smallest amount are the ones that are mostly complete in their regional transportation and mobility infrastructure projects, and so those are the most likely candidates. So they might not, but it's contemplated that they will be.
Okay, perfect. So here's a kind of an overall view of the collections that have been received per service area in addition to the allocations and the balance that is remaining to be allocated. So for the totality of the program, we have approximately 61% of the funds that have been collected to date have been allocated. And in the future, when we present this report, we will be able to be more fine-tuned in our presentation about the actual how much is encumbered, in addition to that, how much is actually expended and out the door, so to speak.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Balance to be allocated?
Correct.
So I'm assuming on Jennifer and DJ, when we bring in the funding, when the impact fees are paid, we're using a first in, first out program. And so none of this 102 million is anywhere close to expiring because of the 10-year. Okay. Just curious, want to make sure it's all going to be there as
Right.
we move forward. Okay.
And that's our job, to work with us as a team and work with you all to be able to get this allocated and out the door to better serve the development community in the city as a whole. So in anticipation of that, we will be again prioritizing that in our presentations in the future. To make sure that we are mitigating any sort of risk in terms of, return or loss of any funds that have been collected to date, because that would not be a good use of city resources and public resources. Okay. And that concludes the actual presentation itself of the semi-annual progress report. We can open it to any sort of discussion that might need to, any questions that you may have?
Any questions?
Okay.
gonna get you a couple books next time to put the mic under so you can.
That's it. I think the whole that's okay.
Seeing none, I guess, do I need to call for a vote?
That's right. That's the exact next thing here. So the consideration of the report.
Okay, I need a motion.
I move that the Capital Improvements Advisory Committee accept the Transportation Impact Fee Semi-Annual Report through September 30th, 2025, as presented by staff.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Okay.
So Chair, will you adjourn the meeting?
Let's see, anybody want to do anything else, talk about anything else? Meeting adjourned.